Greetings. It's INFOWARS Nightly News. It's your Friday edition. I'm your host, Rob Dew. Today is February 3rd, and we've got quite a show for you. Coming up later during our interview section, Alex is going to do a 30-plus minute interview with Fritz Springmeier, picking up where they left off from yesterday's interview on the radio show. But we've got a whole lot more. We're going to talk a little bit about Monsanto, Fast and Furious, and all things in between. So let's get started with our first story. Is a Drudge link that was, we called it the Super Juicy today, and it was TSA trained Super Bowl hot dog sellers to spot terrorists. And there you can see the spot on Drudge. And it seems like an over 8,000 stadium vendor, parking lot attendants, shuttle bus drivers, and other transportation officials received the agency's first observer training for detecting and assessing indicators and planning tactics of potential terrorist activities. So these people will be doing double duty. In addition to slinging you hot dogs and beverages and stuff, they are going to be asking you questions about where you're going and what you're doing, maybe even grabbing a little junk here and there. And pretty interesting how the TSA has managed to just worm their way into every facet of our lives. And no one's going to say anything. And I'm sure they'll gloss over it during Super Bowl coverage and make it seem like it's a great thing for you and I. So anyway, that was our top link on Drudge today. And thanks for Drudge for linking to that. Our next story goes into Fast and Furious. And where it was February 2nd, Eric Holder went before Congress again, and this time to answer more questions, which he didn't do. He stated there's no attempt at any kind of a cover-up. Holder told lawmakers well into a hearing about whether he'd been forthright in responding to requests of the House Oversight and Government Relations Committee, led by Issa, who we found out earlier this week when we had Wayne Madsen on that he was known as a car thief before he became a congressman. And so looking at this article, I did a little bit of digging just into the different stories we had covered into Fast and Furious. There's an INFOWARS article that ATF had plotted to use this to demonize the Second Amendment. And we have the email quotes. Let's pull those up real quick. So out of INFOWARS, the email showed ATF members congratulating each other for blaming border violence on guns bought from U.S. dealers, despite the fact that the feds were the ones delivering them straight to the Mexican criminals under the program, Fast and Furious. And it went on to say that some of these firearms dealers were concerned that these guns were ending up in the bad guys, only to be reassured by the ATF that there's nothing to worry about. So obviously, Holder was not doing any type of cover-up. And we have another article from CBS News. Even they were documenting the fact that the ATF wanted to use Fast and Furious to make a case for gun regulations. Moving on, we'll go to the Weekly Standard that shows that the Obama administration sealed the records of Fast and Furious and the death of Agent Brian Terry. And they sealed the court records containing alarming details of how Mexican drug smugglers murdered a U.S. border agent with a gun and connected to a failed federal experiment that allowed firearms to be smuggled into Mexico. And that's not all. We also have a Department of Justice memo dated April 2nd, 2009. And here, this is from Eric Holder, where he's going into Mexico, Cuernavaca to be exact, and telling them that we're going to be putting agents and money into this whole new effort, and we're committing all these resources to making sure that to supplement our Project Gunrunner. So there you go. Obviously, Holder has no idea what's going on, and the buck doesn't stop with him, and these ATF agents are just out of control, acting on their own cognizance, creating this program. Yeah, we really believe that. In fact, we know this was going on before in the Bush administration. Here's Daryl Issa talking about that on Meet the Press.
And again, we know that under the Bush administration, there were similar operations, but they were coordinated with Mexico. They made every effort to keep their eyes on the weapons the whole time. So we're not per se saying that tracing weapons is a bad idea.
Well, Cheryl, what do you mean?
Yeah, we don't think tracing weapons is a bad idea as long as Republicans are doing it. So see, both sides are doing it, and we're going to illustrate that with some Monsanto news later, that it's both sides of the coin that are trying to poison you and run weapons into Mexico to blame it on the Second Amendment. Moving on, U.S. uses depleted uranium, makes graveyards in Afghanistan. And this has to do with the fact that in almost every type of machinery and every type of weapon that we have, including the A-10 Warthog, the Apache helicopters, the Bradley vehicles, all contain DU munitions. And every time they shoot those in the ground or fire their gun, they're creating DU dust that people are breathing in. It's causing cancers and sores. In fact, they did a examination of the urine and found uranium isotopes which are 300% to 2,000% higher than normal levels. And if you look at Afghanistan as well as Iraq and in Yugoslavia, you find that wherever these weapons are used, you will find graveyards of people dying from cancer and other unusual diseases. And we've had Dr. Doug Rocky on to explain this and how his team, when they were looking into it, they all started dropping dead. And he's not doing too well himself just from the exposure. And this is happening to our men and women who are also using these weapons and then coming home and spreading it to their kids, to their spouses, to anything they touch. It's just not a good thing, and we should not be using depleted uranium. We shouldn't be taking radioactive waste, putting it into our munitions, and then firing it around. Sort of like the same thing that we do with fluoride in the water supply. We're taking a toxic waste and diluting it around to try to mitigate some of the factors of it. And now we come to another interesting article that's had it's been a pretty hot article, or pretty hot subject last couple days. After cutting ties with Planned Parenthood, Komen donations up 100%. And in the wake of this week's announcement that Susan G. Komen for the Cure will no longer be awarding grants to Planned Parenthood, the breast cancer organization's donations have gone up 100% in the last 2 days. And it was Nancy Brinker, founder and CEO of the Komen Foundation, said our donations are up 100% the past 2 days. We understand, and we get very emotional too. We do this every single day of our lives. Now, that was on the 2nd. Today, we have 2 articles, one from the Wall Street Journal, one from Fox News. So we look at Fox News. Komen drops plans to cut Planned Parenthood grants. Apparently, they're having a 180 on this. And then we go also to the Wall Street Journal, pretty much the same headline. Komen drops plans to cut Planned Parenthood grants. So now, I guess they're having an about-face on this issue. And we're going to have Pastor Clenard Childress, who we did a really long expose into the abortion industry. I guess it was 2 money bombs ago, we played his interview, and we're going to have him on Monday to kind of go over this issue and explain things. And in fact, we have a clip from Pastor Childress here from that interview talking about when you get an abortion, it increases your chances of cancer, which is why Susan G. Komen, if they're an organization dedicated to fighting cancer, should not be giving money to a group that their procedures actually increase the chance of cancer, if that makes sense. Here's the clip.
You know, your listeners ought to know that abortion is the most performed operation on a woman. If there's 12% African Americans in this country and they're accounting for, I'm going to use this figure, this is extremely conservative, 37% of the abortions of the nation. Yeah, that's 37%. That means that African American women, are having this operation performed on them more than any other woman. And to the point where that it is genocidal when it comes to the number of live births. Why did I say that? Well, up until 1973, breast cancer was not an issue with African American women. It was not a problem. Now it's epidemic. And Joel Bryn, who's from this great state of New Jersey, more or less did 28 studies, 21 conclusive, that there is a link between a woman who has an abortion, especially a first-term pregnancy, and chooses to abort, will, over 500% in some studies, have basically will contract breast cancer. It is a recent study in Turkey. They concluded 66% of women will contract breast cancer. Your chances increase 66%. And it's simply because when you miscarry, when a woman miscarries, the brain knows it and sends messages throughout the body, shut down. When you surgically do it, and you abort the child surgically, brain does not recognize that, and it continually sends signals. And what organ is affected by it the most is the breast of a woman. By the time it begins to shut down and realize there's no child, there's so many hormones and other things that are there, and they become cancerous later on. Now, African American women now lead the country in preterm deaths of their children because abortion is being sold to African American women as a contraceptive, which is unquestionably the most detrimental thing other than the death of the child, because you're now have created a situation with this woman that she's not able to carry full term when she wants a child. And so preterm deaths, once again, was not an issue in the African American community, and now they lead the country.
And don't take it from Reverend Childress. Look up the information yourself. Look up the studies that have been done. Check that out. And regardless of what your position is on abortion, if girls 16, 17, 18, these young women who are going in there using this as contraception, they need to be educated to the fact that their chances of cancer are going to go up and their chances of never having children are going to go up if they go through this procedure. And, you know, that's really what we have to look at. So I would ask Susan G. Komen to reconsider. If they really are interested in stopping cancers, they should not be funding an organization whose procedures actually lead to the increase of cancer. Moving on to Monsanto, another loving company. This is out of Natural News. Help stop former Monsanto VP from attaining top position at FDA. Sign the petition. And the one man who may be responsible for more food-related illnesses and deaths than anyone in history, Michael R. Taylor, has just been promoted from U.S. Food Safety Czar to Senior Advisor to the Commissioner of the FDA, a position which would enable the giant biotech company Monsanto to silently and legally feed cancer-causing vegetables to every living person who is not 100% strictly organic. President Obama has appointed the former Monsanto vice president and lobbyist Michael R. Taylor to the throne. This is the same man who was food safety czar for the FDA when GMOs were allowed into the U.S. food supply without undergoing a single test to determine their safety risks. And this is like putting terrorists in charge of the world's food supply. What do you think the cancer numbers are going to look like in 2016? So who is Michael Taylor? Probably somebody you've never really heard of. Well, a quick search into his background. He started off as a staff attorney for the FDA back in the late 70s. By 1981, he went to a private practice at King & Spalding, a law firm that represented a biotech company, a little company named Monsanto. Then in 1991, he left the law firm and went to the FDA, back to the FDA, and created the post of Deputy Commissioner for Policy. And between 94 and 96, he moved to the USDA, where he was Administrator of Food Safety and Inspection. Then he returned back to King & Spalding and then went on to Monsanto to become Vice President for Public Policy. Does this sound like a revolving door? He once again, in 2009, returned to government as Senior Advisor to the FDA Commissioner, where he pledged $20 billion to fight hunger in Africa over the next 3 years. Taylor was a senior fellow at a research think tank, Resources for the Future, where he published 2 documents on U.S. aid that were both funded by the Rockefeller Foundation. And we know how loving they are and how much they really want to help you. And now we've got Obama, who wants to appoint this guy to one of the highest levels in our food safety. We've got a clip here from the video that we carry, The World According to Monsanto, and it's all about Michael Taylor. So let's go to that clip right now.
Early on, a gentleman by the name of Michael Taylor became the Deputy Administrator of the Food and Drug Administration right at the time that they were about to set out their policy.
Who is Michael Taylor? Today he heads a foundation called Resources for the Future.
Hello, Marie-Monique speaking.
Hello, it's Mike Taylor.
My questions are about your role. I mean, when